From the campus of Xavier University.
Yeah.
WBOK 1230 AM.
Go.
An Equity Media Station.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. President Trump signed an order ending diversity programs at the State Department, reversing former President Biden's initiative to aid underrepresented groups. Trump's order directs the State Department to remove the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility rule from service and promotion criteria. Billionaire Rick Caruso is opposing the recall of Black Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, calling it a costly distraction. Despite past criticism, he says the city needs unity. Caruso was Bass's 2022 election rival. Louisiana executed Jesse Hoffman using nitrogen gas, the state's first and the United States' fifth such execution. Hoffman, a black man convicted of a 1996 rape and murder, was pronounced dead Tuesday night. And a judge is granting Black New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell a restraining order temporarily blocking the city council's travel ban on officials until next week's hearing. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
It's now time for Let's Elevate, the Arnie and Carey Show with Arnie Filko and Carey Grant.
All right, good evening, New Orleans. How's everybody on this, again, beautiful
day.
Wednesday day and halfway through the week? I'm Arnie Filko.
And I'm Carey Grant. Good evening, everyone.
And Carey, nice to have you back. I know
yes.
Carey took a night off, and, but it's always nice to have us both in studio and have my co-host with me here.
Had to do some politicking, Arnie.
Some politic. Well, we are
not
we are
politicking. I'm just kidding.
We are definitely in the
midst
politicking
of it.
season right now.
Yes,
it
we
is
are.
off. It is running. We're gonna definitely cover some of that tonight.
Yes.
But like we say often, there is not a dearth of issues for
Not
us
at
to
all.
deal with
No,
here.
there's more going on in the world today every 2 or 3 hours than in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I'm staring up on TV here because I'm going to start with this topic because this is a topic, Carey, you and I were familiar with. But and I had an interview today. I think it'll be on TV later tonight.
Okay.
About the New Orleans Levee Board.
Yes.
And the topic is lots of changes are happening over there. Mm-hmm. 3 members of the levee board from the East Bank, because we have an East Bank and a West Bank,
Right.
resigned today.
Wow.
And there has been over the last couple months some real controversy with the board, with Governor Landry and his Lieutenant Shane Guidry
Right.
have really wanted to alter the composition of that board. They named I think it was a law enforcement officer to not only deal with law enforcement, to actually be the chair of the board.
Yeah.
And some of the members of the board that resigned today, don't agree with that action. And really, this goes back, Carey, 20 years after Hurricane Katrina.
Right.
The levee board at the time of Katrina dealt with a lot of different areas. It dealt with flood protection, but it also dealt with asset management. It was running the airport, if you remember, and
a lot of things that weren't flood protection.
Flood protection.
Right.
And the reform that came out of Katrina was that the nominating committee altered the criteria so that the people that were now serving on that board post-Katrina were people that were experts in flood protection.
Right.
They were scientists, they were hydrologists, but people that had a real specialty in that area. And, I have to tell you our city council post-Katrina took that issue up. We were strongly supportive of having experts on there. You had, people like Jay LaPere, Ann Milling, Ruthie Frierson. People remember these names.
Well, yeah, and some of the issues, as people recall, were that some of the previous people were dealing with, like you said, a lot of the asset management, a lot of other things. But some of the people who were on the board weren't capable of understanding what the Corps of Engineers was telling them anyway. If they went to an inspection, if they were doing inspections, what they weren't doing regularly, that type of thing. That's what Arnie's talking about. What they were involved in the reformation and remaking of this thing. After we found out that this was the most important thing to protection in the city. So
No, and
that's what that 20 years ago, that's what the whole argument was.
And again, we're not going to put the blame on Katrina and the board members, but the reality was they had oversight responsibility for the federal system, and the federal system was run and controlled by the U.S. Corps of Engineers.
Right.
And the failure of the levees, the breach of the levees, was as a result of the negligence of our federal government.
Yes.
But what we learned from it was the people that were watchdogs just did not have the experience.
They didn't have the expertise or the experience to really know what they were looking for.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, again, post-Katrina reform, maybe the most important reform when you think about it, was that we changed the composition of the board so that the board had to be comprised of experts.
Right.
And as we built up in the following 5 years and 10 years, all of the levee systems and the protection, now you had real experts that were overseeing that. Well, that all has changed in the last couple months.
Yeah.
Today we had 3 of those people, who I would say were more of the old board type, the experts in watching for flood control.
Right.
They resigned in protest today. You had Jay LaPierre, who was the chair of the nominating committee, I believe, left a couple months ago.
Right.
And the governor, and this isn't only about the levee board. One of the things the governor has been doing since elected is making it easier for the governor to control boards.
Right.
LSU board and other boards.
And making big changes to those boards with a lot of appointments that seem to be very politically motivated. It's not like governors weren't politically motivated before, but there were criteria that seem like they're not as necessary anymore in his eyes.
Absolutely. Well, let's come back to this issue. We got a caller, so let's do our caller. Kevin, are you there?
Yes. How you doing, Mr. Phil? And how you guys doing?
We're good. Hold on a second. We're trying to up your volume so we can hear you a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Now we got you. We got you. What's going on, Kevin? How you doing tonight?
Well, fine. I'm just going to talk about the execution of the inmate.
Yes.
I'll be right quick with it. I'm not going to take your time. It seems like the state and the governor ignore the wishes of the Jewish community, which remind them that of the Holocaust, that they see that this gas, and the Jewish community is very sensitive because that remind them of what they went through, exterminate people by gas. So I think that was an insult to the Jewish community. My second comment that I'm opposed the execution because it's not equally applied. If someone murders someone by an individual or state or government is wrong. Murder is murder. And another thing is that when a black person kill a non-black person, a white person or a non-black person, they're gonna be executed. Like this morning, they're talking about Susan Smith. Susan Smith, the lady who killed her 2 kids, if a black person killed the 2 kids, they would got the death penalty. The jury found some reason they could find that a white person or a non-black person deserved life. You could look at all those mass shootings; they got life. So that's why I oppose it, because it's not equal apply. So that's my 2 cents comment. But I was kind of upset that the government and the governor ignored the wishes of a lot of spiritual leaders, especially the Jewish community.
Yeah,
I'm gonna hang up and let you guys listen.
No, thank you, Kevin.
Yeah,
in fact, that was next on our agenda tonight. Let's break down what your 2 points, because I think they're both really good points. Actually, third point as well. We've talked about this, Carey, a little bit.
Yes.
I am an anti death penalty person.
Right.
I don't think that's where we should be as a society. It was obviously a horrific crime. Nobody's trying to justify what Mr. Hoffman did. But even the victim's family came out publicly. The sister-in-law came out a couple days ago and said, this is not bringing closure. We don't support this. And then, the husband came out and said the same thing, that, he said, I'm not going to be at the execution, and there's no closure with this. And, we haven't had death penalty in Louisiana for many years. And all of a sudden, we have a change in administration. The death penalty's coming back. We actually had two execution dates.
Yeah.
One of the people died a couple weeks ago before he could be put to death. But I think yesterday was a very sad day for our state, for humanity. There were a lot of faith leaders at Angola from all different faiths. The person executed, Mr. Hoffman, had become a Buddhist.
Yeah.
And, one of the legal arguments was that this was a deprivation of his religious rights. I just think it was a sad day. And they appeal. I know a couple of the attorneys. They literally went to every court, federal, state, that they could find. Eventually, the last court was the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was close. It was a 5-4 vote. I'm disappointed. And for example, in Chief Justice Roberts, he would have been the 5th vote to stay the execution, but he didn't do that, and ultimately we lost him. As it relates to the Jewish issue, I'm a member of a coalition called Jews Against Gassing. We've had some guests on our radio show talk about that. There is just a particular sensitivity within the entire U.S. Jewish community and world Jewish community for gassing because of what happened, as you say, in the Holocaust. And in Louisiana right now, under the statute, there's only 2 methods. There's electrocution and gassing. And, there was a suggestion made by one of the federal courts here in Louisiana that maybe you could do something else, firing squad, which they've done in other states. You would have to change the law for that to happen.
Right.
So look, it's done. He was put to death yesterday. There is an account for anybody interested in the NOLA.com. They allowed some of the media to witness it, and it was pretty horrific. I can't even imagine being there and seeing it, but just reading it gave you, the shivers.
Yeah, I'll start off with the witnessing of it because one of our good family friend is Gina Swanson of WDSU, and she was one of the press people who was a witness to this. And I pray for her because this is a horrific thing to have to see. This is a very, very volatile issue, like you said, Arnie, and I think that the country had come to grips with maybe we leave these people in jail for life, that type of thing, because I think most people can deal with somebody being life in prison. You made a great point about the part that bothers me the most about it. There's all kinds of legal hurdles and all that, but from a personal family point of view, I've never been in that type of situation. I don't know anybody who's been in that type of situation, but the fact that the family said it didn't do anything for them, it tells you that an eye for an eye really does not work. And that's more important to me almost about the whole thing, is that the families felt like this wasn't justice. This was nothing.
Right.
And it was really bad. It was, it's the type of thing, it seems like a lot of people had vengeance in their minds and other people, not them, who suffered the most and lost their loved one. So I think that that's what bothers me the most about people pushing for this to happen and saying, oh, there'll be other, executions like this is something we should be looking forward to in this state or anywhere. I don't see it like that.
Kerry, I just think it's part of a bigger issue. And I'm sorry to say this, I really am, because I love our state, I love our city, I love our country. But between the conservatism and isolationism of our federal government, our state government, we've just become a less compassionate state.
Absolutely.
And maybe I'm a bleeding heart liberal. I don't know. I don't think I am, but I do have compassion, and in all of our religions, life is valued, and you mourn. You mourn for the victims and the family.
Yeah.
Nobody's trying to justify what Mr. Hoffman did.
Right.
Now, were there background issues, him growing up?
Yeah.
Yes. And that's been documented in the media the last week or so. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it just seems to me that, it used to be that the reason that you had harsh penalties like a death penalty was either deterrence.
Yes.
I don't know
which
how
doesn't happen
I don't know
anymore
how this
anyway.
deters
No,
people.
I don't think that means anything.
No, I don't
with this
either.
anymore.
And so, I mean, if it's not deterrence, then it's just pure punishment.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, what happened to compassion? What happened to rehabilitation or second chances? Or because everything, all it counts was this guy, while he was in prison, became you know, kind of one of the leaders, helping other inmates.
Yeah.
You know, you and I both know Norris Henderson.
Yeah.
And I have such incredible respect for Norris because of what he went through. And, you know, he's such an advocate for prisoner rights.
Right. Absolutely.
And this just flies in the face of all of that. And, you know, you know, we've been emailing for the last couple days, and yesterday there were emails flying around every half hour based upon what was happening in the court system. And then you got a final email about 7 o'clock, and it was over and done. And, you know, death is final. Okay.
Right.
There's no coming back.
Right.
So I'm sorry. And I appreciate, Kevin, I appreciate the comments.
Yeah, definitely.
We agree. And on the third point you raised, Carey made this point a week or so ago. You know, within the African-American community especially, this should be an important issue because of the mistakes that have been made over the years.
Absolutely. And that's a huge part of my take on it too, is because people are wrongfully incarcerated. And as I say repeatedly, if we were spending this much energy and time, this state alone, because we have so many people incarcerated here with the Innocence Project and things like that, to prove people's innocence or guilt, and have people come out of jail, that would be a great thing. Some of these people who've been in for 40 years, lost 40 years of their lives, wrongfully accused, and been in Angola, which is one of the worst prisons on the face of the earth, you know, for that long. But our community needs to really look at that part and push that part as well. Not just, you know, fighting these executions, but everybody who's in prison.
Right.
Because if you're wrongfully in jail, it's ruining your life and your family's life and everybody's life.
Yeah, it's a tragedy for
It's
everybody.
It's
for
not
the entire
for
community.
the community, for everyone.
Yeah. You know, when we come back, we're going to stay a little bit on this topic. We're not going to go through all four of the amendments today. Maybe next week we can do that before the vote.
Election,
but I do want to talk about Amendment 3 just briefly when we come back because it relates to criminal justice.
Yes.
And we'd love to hear from you tonight, 504-582-9422. Give us a call with any topic, open forum tonight.
Yes.
And we'll be back in just a minute.
Norman Robinson is back.
Can you hear me now?
And he's taking no prisoners.
Can you hear me now?
Each weekday, Norman Robinson brings you commentary with Off the Top.
The incident was shocking, disturbing, disgusting, disappointing, and sad.
Each weekday, Off the Top with Norman Robinson is heard exclusively right here.
It's Off the Top with Norman Robinson on WBOK 1230 AM.
WBOK 1230 AM. Online at WBOK1230.com.
The Arnie and Carey Show with Arnie Philco and Carey Grant.
All right, we're back. These commercials seem shorter and shorter, Carey. I don't know, but we're ready. You and I are always ready.
I'm always ready. Always ready to go.
So, again, next week, Carey and I were talking. Maybe we'll spend some time. A lot of people are talking about the amendments. And, you know, the election is a week from this Saturday.
Yes.
We have early voting going on right now. So, you know, usually on these constitutional amendments, you know, it's a pretty low turnout.
Yeah. But these are really important.
These are really important. And I hope people listening, I mean, it's not that hard. Go out. It'll take 5 minutes. Go out and vote.
Yes.
A week from Saturday. If you can't make it, do your early voting. But, you know, there are 4 constitutional amendments. You know, one big one dealing with taxes, Amendment 2.
Yes.
But the other really big one is Amendment 3, and it deals with the criminal justice system. Right now, in the statutes of Louisiana, there are certain prescribed crimes that if you are 14 to 16 years old, you can be tried as an adult. Things you would, you know, assume: murder, rape, you know, aggravated battery, well, not battery,
major felonies.
Major felonies, okay.
Yeah.
What the amendment is doing is basically opening that up for the legislature to kind of broaden that out.
Yeah.
And look, I'm a no vote on this. This is an easy one for me.
Yes.
And you probably, I think, are too.
Yeah, I agree.
And here's the reason. Look, there are certain crimes that are so atrocious that if you are a juvenile, if you're 14, 15 years old, and you commit them, yes, you should probably be tried as an adult.
Yes.
Okay? But when you try a juvenile as an adult, understanding you are exposing that young man or woman to adult prison, to Angola, to all of the things that go on in a prison like that.
Right.
And look, I think all experts would tell you that you are exposing that person to things that's likely going to harden that youth.
Absolutely.
And as opposed to when you're charged more with a juvenile crime, I think the theory is more rehabilitation.
Right.
That person will not be in the system for life.
Right.
So this is one that, again, in the spirit of, I don't know a better word than compassion, maybe sometimes,
Right.
but in the spirit of not going hardcore, I don't know why we would support this. I mean, I think the statute right now is pretty good.
Yeah.
Covers a lot of
It
the
covers
crimes.
a lot of ground. It's about 16 Part 1 crimes, they call them, and they're pretty serious felonies. And to say you're going to broaden it to what? The first problem with all of these amendments, and I have to say this, is they're all ambiguously written. And they leave a lot of leeway for whoever's next, be it the legislature, governor, whoever, to make decisions about what they are. Usually amendments are pretty clear about what they're telling you can do. This says allow, like you said, the legislature to add crimes to this, basically, is what it's saying in some very vague language, which could mean jaywalking for a kid. It could mean anything.
Yeah.
And that's not.
And the legislature always has the right in session
to do it anyway.
To simply do a bill to amend the current
they had the
law.
thing with the carjacking thing recently, where they had to rule on that, and everybody was in agreement. Yes, this is a heinous thing. It's not just stealing the car to joyride anymore.
Right.
It has other ramifications. So
Right.
that was dealt. But those kind of things, they already have that ability. This is just an ambiguous blanket approval.
Well, the interesting thing is, and you remember this, it's been, 9 years, I think, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
There was a real reform effort on criminal justice.
Yes.
I mean, we as a state and the community,
Yeah.
Look, we had incarcerated per capita more people than any state in the country.
Right, exactly.
A decade ago, the tide started to turn. People and I'm not talking about liberal Democrats. I'm talking
Everybody.
about statewide,
Right.
Governor
Right.
Edwards, everybody. The tide turned to basically make it more reform oriented, that you can't incarcerate your way out of crime.
Right. And it's been working.
And it has been working.
Yeah.
And it just seems like I just said before, we've gone 180 degrees again, and now we're into this, let's lock them up mentality.
Right.
Let's put them in Angola no matter what. Let's kill them through execution.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why we're doing that when crime is down in our community.
Yeah.
And the reforms seem to work. But that seems to be the trend.
Yeah. One thing I'll say I'll go back to what you said in the beginning. First off, I know that people always, have trouble voting or taking time or whatever. But my wife and I early voted. We always early vote. And it took, I swear, it was less than 5 minutes to vote for these 4 things. If you know what you're going in there for, it's only a few items on there, and you'll be in and out before you know it. It won't stop you from going somewhere or having another event. You can go vote on the way to something else.
Absolutely.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is this is another example of like what we talked about where we're going as a country, where we're going as a state. And it just seems like to me there's just a lot of, we want grievance, vengeance, and suffering to be foisted on people. The very thing of putting more people in jail when we're talking about cutting costs and we don't want to pay for this and we don't want to pay for that. Well, incarcerating people costs a lot of money every year. And and we're talking about the governor's talked about the state budget has these fiscal cliffs, and everybody always likes to say that, but this will not help. This won't help to put more people into hardened jail for a long period of time. So even on that level, it doesn't make any sense. But this kind of feeling, this underlying feeling that you can be conservative. You and I have talked about what we consider real republicanism and that type of thing. You can be conservative. We don't have to agree on a lot of things. But has it ever been the way it is about being just evil and vile towards people and life? This is a very different feel to everything.
Well,
it's a very different
the
feel.
whole country.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
it's just a very
feels
different
really
feel.
different. And it feels like, I mean, when you have Doge and Elon Musk firing people left and right, and you and I talked about this.
Yes.
All right, if you're going to really save waste and fraud and save money, that's one thing. But for those people that lost their jobs, it's real.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
They don't have income coming in. It's hard for them to put food on their family plate.
Yeah.
I mean, we just look. I view America not only as the last beacon of democracy in the world, but I view it also as a land of hope still, and a land of compassion and caring and empathy. And we just seem to be losing that. I mean,
well, people don't walk across Central America to sneak into America because it's a terrible place to be.
No.
I mean, I wouldn't walk from Venezuela to
you
here.
don't want to go through the Darien Gap between Venezuela and Panama.
Yeah,
I've seen that area.
Right.
You definitely don't want to go there.
It's very inhospitable, and it's not like they're just coming in on airplanes or anything like that. So there is that beacon of hope thing, and people from all over the world, as you say all the time, international people. We've taken people in from the Ukraine, like we talk about all the time, because of what's going on there. It's not just brown people. It's not just people from Africa or wherever. It's people from all over the world who come here for an opportunity. And to say that all we're doing now is even our own people, we're making it hard on our own people. And one thing I would segue into this, but the thing about the Social Security, you talked about cuts and everything, but you're talking about the third rail of politics, but the idea of messing with the Social Security system, first off, closing offices, telling people they have to come in and verify they're human beings. A lot of people on Social Security are older people, people with disabilities, that type of thing. It will be very difficult for them to come in to be checked in. So this is me, Mr. Musk, that if your grandmother doesn't check in because she can't get there in a wheelchair or something, that she doesn't get benefits anymore. And if she doesn't get benefits anymore, we keep cutting this social net. What do people do? I mean, this is not 1935 where you don't have a social net. You didn't have Social Security or something like that. You have it, and people need it.
Yeah. Well, my co-host is of a younger generation, but I got to tell you, this 69-year-old that's talking right now is right. I haven't taken Social Security, but I'm right there. And we were talking about last night. I mean, they said that they had 4-hour waits for people to get on the phone. I mean, these are real issues, as you say, for senior citizens, for people that are disabled that can't get to an office somewhere. So I don't know. There was a town hall last night at Dillard. I wasn't able to make it because of the radio show, but Congressman Carter was there.
Yes, he was.
Jennifer Vegna from the City of New Orleans Health Department. And, they were talking about Medicaid. And I heard the congressman make a really good point is, the administration can talk all they want about they're going to, they're not going to touch Medicaid. It's really just around the edges, to make sure that they don't have fraud and not. Right. But the reality is you're not gonna save much money from that. No. The real money would be to eliminate Medicaid. Okay? Right. And if you do that, you are touching that third rail that you talked about.
Absolutely. Those things, the core of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And first off, let's face it, they always talk about these being entitlement programs, and you can say they're entitlement programs, but people had deducted from their paychecks lots of money over the years
understood
for
that
to be part of their entitlement.
Investment.
Maybe it didn't pay for all of their entitlement, like you said, their investment, but it paid for a hell of a lot of it.
Yeah.
So, to be eligible, you have to have so many quarters, as people know. As you get older, you'll start realizing what all that stuff means. And you can't apply if you didn't have this before. So there's all those parts to it too, or that really bother me, because if you, like you said, if you start nibbling around the edges, you are not going to stop nibbling around the edges. The closing of Social Security office is a really heinous thing that will cause people harm. This is no joke. It's like you said, getting rid of people who work for the people, helping them out with their benefits will hurt people.
The good thing is I'm starting to believe again in our judicial system because it seems like for everything Musk/Trump does, there at least there's a district court somewhere. I saw it yesterday, the U.S. aid, which we had terminated all of the funding. That's now been put on hold, okay?
Right.
And you had some other things going on. Now, again, and look, let's give credit to our Chief Justice
for coming out.
For coming out yesterday
absolutely.
when Trump started to go after the district court judge, say he should be impeached, he was an embarrassment, blah, 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 blah. You had the head of the U.S. Supreme Court basically come out, without naming Trump. He didn't name him, but he basically came out, he chastised him, and he said, that's not justice, okay? And I give him credit for that because he's 100% right.
Yeah, and what has to start happening, and this is what I say about all this, I'm glad to see Chief Justice Roberts and some of the courts just doing their legal due diligence. They're literally not being partisan to me. They're just saying, you're saying something that's unconstitutional. You're doing something that you can't do. Executive orders don't mean anything because you can't just write down you're changing the law. I mean, you can't. Congress has some taking this and everything. But the thing Congressman Carter's town hall showed last night is, and a lot of these town halls where you've even told Republicans not to go to town halls, is the pressure from the people because people are starting to feel the pain.
Yeah.
And what Congress needs to do is get its back up. All these people are like, I'm MAGA and I'm riding this train and everything. This train will run over you and you will not be in office. All your little perks and everything you want to keep will be gone.
Yeah.
I mean, they guarantee you. And one thing I want to say this to you because you brought it up first. When I saw that Senator Cassidy was asking questions of what Robert Kennedy was trying to do, I said, well, when you had the chance to vote him down, you didn't. And now you're worried about what he's about to implement. It's like, be worried because the measles outbreak in Texas is growing every day. So, you could have put a stop to some of the foolishness here, but now you're going to start getting your backs up and your constituents are going to put the heat on all of these guys and women.
Yeah. Well, I believe this. I just think elected officials should vote according to their heart and their principle and not worry about politics. I happen to be a fan of Senator Cassidy. I like him personally. I like him professionally. I think his vote on Kennedy was wrong. And politically, we talked about it. He may have done it. I think there's a lot of reasons, but politically, one reason he may have done it was he's going to face a challenge from the right. He already has one right now in John Fleming. And I believe that the way he wins the election, the re-election, is to cross over vote. And people would have respected him more for sticking with his principles as a doctor.
Yes.
Voting against an anti-vaxxer.
I totally agree.
But he didn't. Let's hope that the measles outbreak is controlled here because it's a serious thing.
Well, I think the thing about it, and he's a great example of it, the thing about it from my point of view, from what I've seen over the last few years, is that him going along with them and say, oh, here, I gave you what you wanted, Trump, that wasn't going to stop them from putting somebody up against you. They don't do that.
Right.
They want everybody to be lockstep.
Yes.
So, and they want punishment. So they want to punish you for even standing up and saying a few things.
Yes.
So I think he was going to get challenged anyway. And like what I'm saying, when I'm talking about raw practical politics, then lean over the other way and get some of us to vote for you because then you could stay in office.
Right. Exactly.
If you do it that way, you can win too.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's a real issue that a lot of these guys and women have to start looking at. They really do because people are really upset. The stock market thing, everything is all intertwined and people losing jobs, as you said, Arnie. When you lose your job and you can't go and get unemployment benefits because the unemployment office doesn't exist anymore, not because the benefit isn't there, but when you can't do that and there's no safety net, these congressmen will hear some people holler. They will definitely feel a burn on this, so to speak.
Well, this is a good segue into local New Orleans politics, which is,
there we go.
I mean, come on, is there anything more fun? I mean, we're all Saints fans here, but outside of the football season in the off season, our political season rivals football any day of the week.
It's every day and always.
Every day and always. And I want to say this, Carey. Now, this is Arnie Filko saying this. I'm not going to put this on Mr. Grant here. I think one of the beauties of our show, and thank you to WBOK for allowing us to do this, is it's okay for us to have differing opinions. I can tell you that we have some really great talent. You know, we're preceded by Gerard Stevens, who is, I think an excellent radio host. You know, we're going to look at things at times through different prisms, and we're going to have different opinions with our background. It has been fun over the last 24 to 48 hours to listen to WBOK and WWL because they have gone back and forth here on these sanitation contracts.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, one of the owners of WBOK, Troy Henry, is one of the, won the bid for the long-term sanitation contract. There's a bit of a war going on, and look, we're not going to talk about that tonight, or maybe even tomorrow. And I'm not even sure I want to venture into that one, but we will at some point. But what I do want to segue from that is the politics that are going on in our country and, in our city. And I want to go back to a front page story from Sunday dealing with where the voters are in New Orleans right now.
Yeah.
It was really eye-opening, Carey, to see the percentage of New Orleanians and how they feel about our city right now. And this is all parts of our community, black, white, everybody. There were two surveys that were cited, one by Ron Fosho, that only 9% rated the performance of city government positive. And then there was a UNO survey that said that only 33% approved of Mayor Cantrell's job performance. And then if you kind of put that on top of some other news about our population loss, it has been, we are fifth, listen to this for everybody, fifth in the United States in terms of the amount of loss that we've had here in the last decade. We've lost over, I think it's 100,000 since Katrina.
Right.
We've lost something like 25,000 just in the last few years. Boy, this is a trend that should be of concern to all of us. Carey, why don't you comment on that? And then we got a caller. We're going to take Pop Jones.
Sure.
Here.
And this happens all the time when we get close to mayoral elections, which is, the real 4-year election cycle. Is they start doing these polls and these studies and everything about what's going on and where we stand. And this is one of those type polls that tells you, first off, what usually happens like with this is it tells you what people's feelings are in pretty much the recent past about what's going on in the city. I think people have somewhat better outlooks on the future than they did more recently, but like you said, this does tell you a lot about how they feel about the direct government and that type of thing. And also the population thing is not so much a poll as it is a census value of where things are and where things are going.
It's a snapshot
and it's
in
a
time.
snapshot in time because the census, people may not realize, census is not just every 10 years. There's updates that happen all the time. And that is a troubling and interesting one because it has it ties into some of the other things you're talking about already, because those are some of the reasons why people leave.
Right.
It kind of correlates.
And as you said, I mean, there was another, survey poll taken where I think it was something like 60% were optimistic about the future, which I'm just going to say this. I think where we are as a community, and not everybody, obviously, but the majority, I think people are optimistic of the future. They see the vision. They see the hope of a new mayor, a new council. But I also think it's a reflection of the negativity of our current leadership right now. And people look at what's going on with especially our mayor, and people are disgusted with it. And we'll talk more. But let's get to one of our leaders in our community, Pop Jones. How you doing tonight?
Thank you very much for taking my call.
Of course. What's going on?
I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. But look, you won't believe this. For the time that y'all announced that y'all coming on from 6 to 7, I normally sleeping in the morning at that time. And I kept saying to myself, why am I missing them? I just happened to have the radio on this
That's
time.
funny. Well, Pops, it's
And
funny
I
you
say,
said
wow,
that. It's funny you said that because somebody called me this
this is the
afternoon
reason.
and said, I've been trying to listen to you. You're not on. And
Man,
I said, you know what? At 6 a.m., you would
look.
not want to hear
No.
Carey and me in the
No,
morning.
it would just be a lot of grunting and
Man,
groaning.
this is something I couldn't believe. I felt like
But you phoned us
taking
now.
me a drink.
You know,
I said, all this time, and I never asked a question. Well, I keep missing them.
Well, we hope you'll.
But look,
Yes.
I have this one question. From now on, I'll try to listen and participate. But I have this one question I want to ask.
Go ahead.
Since our president is threatening all our allies, taking their minerals if they don't do what he's asking them or telling them to do, then what is the relationship with Israel at this time? Is he still supporting Israel like the other Democratic other presidents?
Yeah. Good question.
Or is he not supporting Israel?
No, good question. Well, first of all, don't get me started on Ukraine, Carey. Otherwise, we'll go for the rest of the show on that. But
yeah, well, I know your relationship.
no,
with
I'm
Ukraine.
very pro-Ukraine, and you know, we covered a little bit about it last night. I mean, Trump is very transactional, and you know, he should be principled, but he's transactional. And the whole mineral rights deal, and today there was some news that now he wants the Ukrainians to allow the Americans to run the nuclear sites, which actually may not be a bad deal. As it relates to Israel, it's a little bit more complicated. Yes, Trump is very pro-Israel, but you know, I sometimes I question where he comes from because I think he's transactional. I mean, he sees what's in it for him, and you know, he and Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, you know, they're very close, very, very similar in many ways.
Yes.
And
but should it be that way?
Well, you know, I got to tell you, Pop, and some of the listeners may not like this answer, but I'm always going to be straight. I mean, I'm very pro-Israel. I've been pro-Israel since my youth. It's a very difficult situation. I mean, Hamas is a terrorist group, and unfortunately for a lot of the deaths of the Gazans, you know, it's because Hamas, you know, puts the citizenry as shields. And it's really tragic how many Palestinians have lost their lives in this. For Israel, I mean, you can't have a terrorist organization on your border, and you can't have 25 living hostages that are still being held. And, you know, if you watch what's happening in Israel, by the way, there are protests every night of the week against the government because they want the hostages returned. So I don't know where this is going to go. It distresses me because we were on a path where hostages were being released, and Hamas had a chance to release all of them. They rejected that, and Israel decided we're going back in now for conflict. And, you know, I think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. So it's very difficult, you know, and we'll talk more about it. We're going to devote at least a show here to the Middle East because it's very complicated. But as it relates to our president, you know, he has been, as was Biden, they have been pro-Israel and been supportive. And we'll just have to see where this goes. Pop, thank you for calling in. Don't be a stranger.
Well, okay.
I got to get to a break here.
I that, Mr. Povich, because I thought about the great August Wilson.
Yes.
That when they say two trains running, and I know where you stood at with your family in Israel, so I figured it was really a complicated situation for you, and that's why I really wanted to find out where you stood and what you thought about what was the president doing.
Well, I appreciate it. It is complicated and very personal, and we'll cover that in a future show here, I promise you. Thank you, Pop. Take care of yourself.
I will continue to listen. Thank you very much.
All right. We will be back in just a minute.
WBOK 1230 AM online at WBOK1230.com.
Hey everybody, it's Graylin Bryant Banks.
And Kimber White Dupree.
From the front porch, y'all. You know how we do. Every Monday is Movie Monday.
And Tuesday is Trivia Tuesday.
And y'all know we have nothing but bad cheering coming through here on Wednesday.
But stick with us. On Thursday, we travel.
That's right. And Friday's Free Your Mind Friday, so get your brass up.
Something on your mind? Want to get it off your chest?
Holla at your people. WBOK 1230 AM, the station you listen to.
All day long.
Hello, friend. Tavis Smiley here with a special announcement. You can catch my show at a new time. Weekdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Same great topics, same great guests, same great conversations, just a little earlier in the day. It's Tavis Smiley, weekdays 1 to 4 p.m. only on WBOK 1230 AM, what New Orleans is talking about.
From Gentilly to New Orleans East, WBOK is what New Orleans is talking about. WBOK, 1230 AM.
The Arnie and Carey Show with Arnie Philco and Carey Grant.
All right, we're back, everybody. 504-582-9422. Please join us for our last 15 minutes. And Carey and I were just talking. I mean, tomorrow night, we definitely got to talk about some of the court rulings today.
Yes.
As it relates to the city. There were some pretty significant rulings that came out of Civil District Court today.
Yeah.
Probably going to be appealed, will be appealed.
And Arnie, one thing that going back to the survey thing, if I recall right, it seemed like to me there was a real strong issue in the surveys that I saw about the council and the mayor in the future getting along a lot better than they are now. I mean, I think people are really weary of this. I really believe that.
I think this is a big one. And I'm just going to say this. If I'm a mayoral candidate or a council candidate, one of my platforms is, we're not going to give up our responsibilities that are in the charter,
right.
But we're going to try to unify as much as we can because, look, we're going to cover this. I have some pretty strong opinions as to the travel and everything else that I will espouse. We're going to get into tomorrow night. But the one thing is it's starting to come across in a way where most citizens are just like shaking their head and saying, I just want my street fixed,
right.
Okay?
Right.
My light fixed.
Right.
And I think in the election, I think candidates are going to hear that about how they would get along. And look, I know what it is to fight with the branches. I mean, my council, 2006 and then 2010 in, early years. I mean, we had real battles with the mayor, okay? Yeah. But there were at times today, there were times where we really unified. I told you about this Fox interview today.
Yes.
The other topic of that is and we're going to get a lot of this over this year, is we're approaching our 20th anniversary.
Yeah,
and the reporter asked about the public housing issue.
Yeah.
We had, if people remember, I remember exactly, December 20, 2006. You can Google it, anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of the most difficult days maybe in the history of the city council. Right. I mean, we had riots inside the chamber, outside the chamber.
I was there, I remember.
You remember. But ultimately, the administration and a unanimous city council came together to say that we wanted a new vision of public housing.
Right.
And the reporter said, are you proud of it 20 years later? And my answer is yes, I am, because we created a different vision, a real community. And, not perfect by any means. I wish HUD had built more units. Yeah. But the reality is I go back to some of the community now, and I'll see people on the street, and I'll just say, how do you like living there? And to a person, I got to tell you, it's almost been unanimous. People said, I really appreciate the change.
Yeah, I think people do, and I hear the same thing from people that I know who live there, and people who who I've talked to who are in that community, working in that community or whatever. I think everybody thinks it's changed everything. But you made a great point, Arnie. The greatest point is it would have behooved HUD to build more.
No question.
The whole thing about affordable housing here, I think that is the answer, the affordable housing, the reason why we have the issues that we have now. And I think that we wouldn't have a quarter of the issues maybe if they hadn't stopped. I'm just being honest with you. I think that they could have easily kept going.
No question. Yeah. And you remember, because you were in government. I mean, we had HUD and Hano.
Yeah.
That was on the local end. And, you know, the issue wasn't so much the quantity. It was, are we going to radically change
what it
public
was?
housing?
Right.
And we had gone to Atlanta. City Council had taken some of the members because they had a development called Eastlake, which was a model nationally where you built schools and community centers, recreation facilities in and around the community. It wasn't vertical housing like in Chicago. People in Chicago may remember Cabrini Green, for example.
Yes.
And it was a different vision. And I have to tell you, this is where I really gave Mayor Nagin credit for that. And all 7 members of the city council, white and black, came together. And on the morning, not only were we facing a lot of protesters, but we got calls from some pretty significant national people. I'm not going to name her, but a significant congressional leader called up that morning. I took the call. She said, Mr. Filko, what you're doing is a travesty. It's wrong. And I have to tell you, we held together. We unified. The mayor was with us. And again, not everybody will agree with this. And the quantity of units definitely was a problem. But I do believe that if you're being honest and objective, you know, when you go around New Orleans today and see some of the developments, I mean, they are much better for those that are residing in them in terms of quality of life than what we have.
And I have to say this in defense of what was done, because it was very controversial. It is very controversial. But what was going to happen to those buildings if they had stayed and just been cleaned out, or, you know, whatever they were going to be, it was not going to improve the quality of life. It just was not. And that was, for me, that was part of my issue about let's do something better. I mean, you know, just putting back the same, like you said, the high-rise housing where people are housed like, you know, animals in these small apartments and everything was just not going to be well done if we just cleaned the walls out and, you know, repainted things.
It required more.
It required a lot more.
You know, Carey, it was funny as I was being interviewed, and it occurred to me that period, that 2006 through 10 period, was maybe one of the most important times in the history of the city. I mean, when you think about it, the topics we dealt with, public housing being included, some of the reforms, the levy board, the inspector general, you know, the biggest one of all, in my opinion, is the question was, do we reopen New Orleans?
Sure.
Do we open the Ninth Ward?
Or change areas to be, you know, green spaces.
Exactly.
That,
people
not
remember the
anymore.
dots.
The dots,
I mean, think about what New Orleans would have been today had we gone in that other direction.
It was a very existential conversation. This could be a city easily of 200, 150,000 people, and a very much different city if we had followed some of those leads. And I think the people here, like you said, I always say this about myself, is I think we were all here for a reason. I really believe that. And I think everybody who was able to dug in, from the citizens all the way up to the mayor, and everybody dug in to try and do the best they could for what we got out of it. And I think we see a lot of real benefits.
And we
did, but it took a lot of time, energy, and effort. Real effort. People have to understand it was a lot.
And people really, again, not always, but people really work together. I mean, citizenry and government. I mean, you remember the small meetings the month or two after Katrina. And then there were larger meetings. And then there were, I never forget this word. I never heard of it. Charrettes.
Charrettes, right.
You remember that?
Thousands of those.
Thousands of people. I mean, it was real citizen engagement at the time. And maybe this is something that we can get back to. Maybe this is, as we look to the next leadership in our city, the citizen engagement from all of these great groups that are here in our community. And the other thing I want to say, I just said this on the air on the interview today, we got to sometimes give ourselves a pat on the back. And I mean the citizens, because I don't think most cities in America would have come back 20 years later like New Orleans has come back. And we can debate all of the problems we have here, and we do, and we can bitch and complain about it. But my God, we're here. We're here. The city is thriving. The city has great potential, and that's because of New Orleanians. It's because of the citizens that refuse to give up.
I just think that people need to understand the recent fires in Los Angeles probably were like 10% of Los Angeles proper square miles, whatever. we were 80% of our city was devastated by the storm. 80% of the landmass was devastated. And the rest of it wasn't in much better shape either. The places that weren't flooded were in pretty bad shape. To say that we're looking at this 20 years later, which is a great time to reflect going back, but also, Arnie, you're right, reflect about what got us here and how we can go forward for the next 20 years, because I think that's what people want to see. And we know we can do it. We've said this many times before, and that's what this show's about. But we have to really get back to that kind of pulling together and working together thing that we did. If people want their streets to be better, if we put some of the effort that we have with what we did then, we can do something with all that now.
Well, and, you know, we picked the title of the show, Elevated Conversations, for a reason, because I think we are entering a time period right now where all of us in New Orleans, no matter what neighborhood you live in, no matter, again, whatever, whether you're white or black or Latino, we've got to elevate, one, the expectations of our community, which means the expectations of our next elected leaders.
Yes.
We got to elevate the civility of the conversation amongst all of us as New Orleans, because look, we have all been through a collective trauma with Katrina and the 20 years since.
Absolutely.
What a shame it would be that we don't realize that potential of our city, given what we've come through.
Yeah, and like you said, and just remind ourselves that of all the American cities and all the things that people have gone through, we went through the most. And we were first pretty much on that level.
Yes, we were. Yes, we were. Well, this has been a great show. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Carrie and I will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. We hope that you will join us. And I'm looking forward. 11 o'clock tomorrow, I'm going to be in front of my TV watching basketball.
Absolutely.
Great time of the year.
March Madness is one of the best things there ever was.
It is a lot of fun. And
I can't wait for that big upset that always happens.
I only got 2 words. 12:30 tomorrow, Wisconsin Badgers. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
WBOK.